He has sold more than 170 million albums. He built a name so large that even people who never followed country music know exactly who he is. He walked away from it all voluntarily at the height of his fame, came back on his own terms, and proved he could still fill stadiums well into his 60s. So, how does a man like Garth Brooks find himself at 64, fighting a lawsuit across 2 states, watching a brand new bar struggle through its first year, losing a chunk of his core fanbase over a beer, and reportedly considering leaving the country altogether? This isn't the story of one bad moment. This is several things collapsing at the same time, and the details are worse than most people realize. The lawsuit nobody saw coming, and the way he handled it made everything worse. On October 3, 2024, a complaint landed in a Los Angeles court that sent shockwaves through the country music world. The woman behind it, identified only as Jane Roe, had worked as a hairstylist and makeup artist for both Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood. She began working for Yearwood in 1999, and Brooks brought her on to his personal team in 2017. By her account, the working relationship shifted quickly once he learned she was going through serious financial difficulties. According to the filing, he used that vulnerability as leverage. The allegations are detailed and serious. Roe claims that in 2019, Brooks invited her to travel with him to Los Angeles for a Grammy tribute event. When they arrived, she discovered he had booked a single hotel suite with 1 bed for the 2 of them. She alleges that, in that room, Brooks sexually assaulted her. The complaint also describes a separate incident at his home, where she claims he emerged from a shower and forced her hands onto his body. The filing covers a pattern of alleged behavior between 2019 and 2024, including sexual harassment, battery, and exploitation of her financial dependence. What made the story even more complicated was Brooks' response. Before Roe filed anything publicly, he had already filed his own lawsuit in Mississippi in September 2024, under the name John Doe. His legal team argued she was attempting to extort him, demanding millions in exchange for silence. He compared it to a loaded gun pointed at his face, saying paying any amount would be admitting guilt. He stated clearly he was incapable of the behavior she described. The legal maneuvering was messy. His team tried to have her California case dismissed and pushed to consolidate everything in Mississippi, a state with no anti-SLAPP protections that would have made it harder for Roe to fight back. Her attorneys called the Mississippi filing a bad faith move designed purely to suppress her ability to speak. A federal judge in California denied Brooks' motion to dismiss in December 2024. Then, in May 2025, the Mississippi case was declared moot by a judge, leaving the California case unresolved. As of early 2026, both parties have requested a trial by jury. In a recent development just last month, a California federal judge denied Brooks a renewed motion for summary judgment, meaning the case will almost certainly head to trial later this year. Discovery has been ongoing, and legal analysts suggest a late summer or early fall 2026 trial date is likely. The longer it drags on, the harder it becomes for Brooks to fully move forward. The bar he spent 3 years building, and why the first year became a separate news story. While the lawsuit was detonating in late 2024, a completely separate situation had already created its own public relations damage earlier that year. On March 7, 2024, Brooks and Trisha Yearwood officially opened Friends in Low Places Bar and Honky Tonk at 411 Broadway in Nashville. The venue is massive, 54,715 square feet across 4 floors, making it the largest honky tonk on the entire strip. Yearwood designed the food menu herself. Brooks bought the building in 2021 and spent 3 years on the project. But the reviews that came back within the first 2 weeks told a sharply different story. Complaints were immediate and spread quickly across Google, Yelp, and social media. Customers described prices that felt steep even by Broadway standards. An undisclosed entertainment surcharge appeared on bills without being posted visibly. Some customers reported being unable to pay with cash at the bar. The most consistent complaint was about the music. Multiple reviewers reported hearing Flo Rida's Low and other non-country tracks, rather than the classic country Brooks had promised. Now, a full year after opening, The bar has stabilized, but not without scars. In December 2025, the venue made headlines again when a brawl broke out during a live broadcast, forcing security to shut down the rooftop bar early. Local Nashville media covered the incident extensively, with one journalist noting that the kind of trouble Brooks said he wanted to prevent has found its way inside anyway. The bar remains one of the largest on Lower Broadway, but the opening week narrative had already been written by disappointed reviews, and those negative impressions spread across the internet during the same year the lawsuit broke. The Bud Light decision that split his fanbase in two. What a lot of people covering the current situation skip over is that Brooks had already lost a significant portion of his core audience over a separate controversy months before the bar even opened. In June 2023, Brooks was participating in a panel discussion at the Billboard Country Live event in Nashville when he was asked about his upcoming bar. He mentioned that friends in low places would serve every brand of beer. At the time, Bud Light was in the middle of a massive consumer boycott driven by conservative fans after the brand had run a promotional partnership with a transgender influencer. Other country artists had made very public statements against serving Bud Light. Kid Rock had filmed himself shooting cases of it. John Rich and Travis Tritt had both announced they wouldn't serve it. The conservative country fanbase had made boycotting Bud Light a cultural and political statement, and many expected the biggest name in country music to fall in line. Brooks went the opposite direction. He not only confirmed he would serve Bud Light, but added a comment that went viral. He said that if people wanted to come to his bar, they were welcome, but they needed to come with love. Then he said that if someone couldn't do that, there were plenty of other places on Lower Broadway to go. The internet immediately amplified that comment as Brooks calling boycotters something significantly less polite, which spread widely regardless of accuracy. The reaction was swift and harsh. People began posting videos of themselves throwing out Garth Brooks albums and merchandise. Forum posts declared lifetime fan relationships over. Texas Governor Greg Abbott amplified a parody article claiming Brooks had been booed off a stage, reflecting how agitated the story had made the political right. Brooks doubled down in a Facebook live stream, saying diversity and inclusiveness had always been who he was, and that he wasn't changing his position. For people who agreed with him, it was a courageous moment. For the portion of his audience that had been with him since the early 1990s and held deeply conservative values, it felt like a betrayal. That reduction in unconditional fans was already in place before the lawsuit arrived and before the bar opened. The personal toll, the Ireland plan, and what people close to him are saying. None of what is described in the headlines captures what the past 18 months have actually looked like for Garth Brooks personally. Sources close to him during the height of the legal scrutiny described a man under a level of internal pressure with no real parallel in his career. Brooks has always been described by people who know him well as someone who reads every headline and feels every criticism deeply. The lawsuit hit differently because it wasn't about music or business or politics. It was a direct assault on his identity as a person, as a husband, and as someone who had built his entire public brand on being decent, generous, and trustworthy. Reports from people close to him during this period described elevated blood pressure, disrupted sleep, and a shift in daily habits. He was said to be relying heavily on comfort foods under stress, with observable physical changes noted by people around him. He was described as furious in a way that went beyond frustration, a deep and sustained rage that even a complete legal victory could not undo the reputational damage already caused by months of headlines. Trisha Yearwood became central to his ability to keep functioning. People close to the couple described her as his primary anchor, pushing back hardest against the media spiral, reminding him that his worth wasn't defined by what was being written about him. She stood beside him publicly at every opportunity, including performing alongside him at the state funeral for former President Jimmy Carter at the Washington National Cathedral in January 2025. She appeared with him at the Opry 100 celebration in March of that year and joined him when her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame was unveiled. But what made the Yearwood angle particularly painful was that her name had also been drawn into the lawsuit. Rowe's legal team argued in the filings that Yearwood had known about what was allegedly happening and done nothing to stop it. Given that Rowe had originally been her employee, the claim placed Yearwood in an extraordinarily difficult position, professionally and personally. Having her name attached to these proceedings, however indirectly, was its own form of damage. Then there was the Ireland story. In conversations with fans during late 2024, Brooks let slip that he and Yearwood had been seriously discussing buying a home in Ireland. He mentioned that Yearwood had fallen head over heels for the country during a tour they had done there together. The comment was framed as a real estate discussion, but in the context of everything happening around him, the detail of two American icons contemplating a significant presence in another country landed differently than it might have in quieter times. Where everything stands right now, and why the worst may not be over. By early 2026, Garth Brooks was in a position that no amount of career preparation could have fully readied him for. He was simultaneously managing an unresolved federal lawsuit containing the most serious allegations ever made against him publicly, the ongoing reputational aftermath of the bar's complicated launch, and a fan base that had already been fractured before any of this began. He was not hiding. He performed at the United States Grand Prix in Austin, Texas in October 2025. He appeared at the Opry 100 celebration. He continued his Las Vegas residency into 2025 and made plans for a new round of tour dates in 2026. His approach appeared to be to keep working, keep showing up, and refuse to allow the controversy to become the reason he stopped performing. But that also meant every public appearance carried the weight of every unanswered question still circulating. The legal situation specifically has a long road ahead. The California case remains the real battleground now that Brooks' Mississippi effort has effectively ended. Unless a settlement occurs, and recent reports suggest settlement talks have stalled, a federal judge will oversee a trial expected to begin in late summer or early fall 2026. The discovery process in a federal civil case is extensive and typically generates its own rounds of public filings and media coverage. Every procedural development becomes another news cycle. That pattern is likely to continue for some time, regardless of the eventual outcome. The financial picture remains substantial. His net worth is estimated at around $400 million, built over decades of record-breaking touring and album sales. A lawsuit, even one this serious, does not threaten his financial foundation in any immediate practical sense. What it threatens is something harder to rebuild: the specific identity he spent 30 years constructing. Brooks had always been positioned in the public mind, not just as a successful entertainer, but as a good man, someone whose charitable work through his Teammates for Kids Foundation was genuine, someone who walked away from fame to raise his daughters and came back on his own terms. The lawsuit directly attacks that identity at its foundation, regardless of how it ultimately resolves in court. The industry has been watching carefully and quietly. There have been no dramatic public distancing statements from Nashville. No major award shows have stripped him of past honors. But the conversations happening behind closed doors in the country music business are harder to assess, and the long-term impact on his relationship with the industry he helped build is genuinely uncertain. What is certain is that the accumulation of everything that happened between June 2023 and early 2026 represents the most sustained and damaging period of public difficulty in his entire career. A political controversy that cost him a meaningful portion of his conservative fan base. A bar opening that generated headlines about broken promises and, more recently, security problems. And a federal lawsuit containing allegations that, pending resolution, will follow every public mention of his name for the foreseeable future. None of these things individually would be enough to significantly alter the legacy of someone with his record. Together, arriving in the compressed time frame they did, they constitute something different, and how he navigates what comes next will define the final chapter of a story that was, for most of its length, one of the most remarkable in American music. What are your thoughts about Garth Brooks? Share with us in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. For more interesting stories like this, be sure to click on the next video that pops up on your screen. You never know what you'll discover next.